welcome to The Writer's Dream, a program where writers chat with other writers about publishing, from writing to editing to marketing. Today we have with us Anne Canadeo. She is a cozy mystery writer. Anne is the author of the Black Sheep Knitting Mystery Series. The latest book in that series is here, The Silence of the Llamas, which came out last month, January. And Anne has also written the popular Thomas Kincaid series, writing as Catherine Spencer. Anne, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You have quite a body of work. What first got you interested in writing mystery novels?
I have always loved mysteries. Since I was a kid, I loved Sherlock Holmes and Nancy Drew and any sort of mystery on TV. Especially as an adult, Masterpiece mysteries and all the different detectives. And there's a certain type of mystery that I enjoy that's not violent, not graphically violent, but there's a lot of emphasis on character and character development. So that's the kind of mystery I always enjoyed writing, and I always reading, and I've always had ideas for writing those books, but I could never, after the initial image, I could never sort of get the plot together, and never, as a working writer, had too much time to figure out, to teach myself how to do that. And at a certain point, I had an idea for a mystery that took place at a restaurant, and I decided I'm just going to do this. And I just read piles and piles of different sorts of series mysteries. And I then read a very interesting book called How to Write a Mystery. And I think the author's name is Sharon McCorkle. And I'm sure there are some great books about writing mysteries out there, but this one, for some reason, the way she laid it out there just clicked for me. And I saw, what I had not been doing and what I needed to do. And
what was that? What were you, you had all these ideas. What helped you and made you able to piece it together into a cohesive story?
Well, we've gotten to know each other a little over the past couple of days. I'm just this very obvious, sincere, out there kind of person. It was hard for me to hide, who the killer was. So I had to learn that sleight of hand and how to create a plot that is not a straightforward story, which is what I'd always been used to writing in my other books, but more of a labyrinth for the reader, so that they are led down different paths that are false paths.
Right.
And
a lot of red herrings.
Exactly. And some of those paths, they may derive some information from. And some of those paths, as I've learned over the course of the last couple of books I've written in this series, you can use those as a writer to create real turnarounds and real surprises in the story. So it builds the characters' expectations and it builds the reader's expectations to go down those false paths, and then they find out, oh, I was totally wrong about that person or their motives or what was really going on. They weren't having an affair. They were bringing that person for dialysis.
Right.
So they're not this horrible person. So that's something that I learned how to play with later. But basically, hiding the real story and really creating 2 or 3 stories, 2 or 3 plausible plots that the characters all get involved with. The amateur sleuths, which is my beat,
right,
and hiding the real story, I think, is the trick of it.
Now, you said before you got to writing your first mystery novel that you had these ideas, sort of lurking.
Yes.
Where did they come from? I mean, did they come from your life, or?
Well, let's see. The most distinct mystery idea I can remember coming to me was I was at a spa and I was getting a treatment in a room that was called a fandango wrap, and the room was dark, and it seemed very mysterious to me. And this woman with a very heavy foreign accent, said, "Time for your fandango," and and I'm in, and then I'm all alone in this room and wrapped in muslin and unguents, and there's and I said, somebody could sneak in here and give me a lethal shot of something that mimics a heart attack, and no one would ever know, and they would think I died from the fandango wrap. So I thought that, I had this idea for this mystery at that point, but again, I was not able to bring that all together. Later, I think in the third book in this series, the characters do go to a spa where there actually is more than one murder, and I did use the concept of someone in a treatment room getting the treatment. So I was able to use that later.
Would you say there's a lot of you in your novels? Like, because I know, and I feel this way as a writer, that there are pieces of me probably scattered throughout all of my characters that people who know me really well would probably spot. Is it the same for you, or is...
Yes, there are in all of my I think every writer identifies strongly with one character in their book, even if that book is not in the first person. In graduate school, I think I was pretty obsessed with the figure of the artist in various stories,
Yeah.
but I can see that there are bits of me in all the characters, and I think I have said this, in talks that I've given about my books, that I'd heard once a psychologist saying that when you have a dream, all the figures in a dream are a reflection of the dreamer. And I think that that's the same thing for writers, and because you are sort of in a dream state when you're writing, and
Yeah.
these characters who are amalgams maybe of people you've met or know, I think there's always a little bit of your own personality. And our personalities are so vast, I think that we come to terms and agree on what we would like to be. And I think that most people are very flexible. They can be a mom, they can be a teacher, they can, they can play all
That's
these different
true.
roles in their own life.
That's true.
So I think that as a writer, you're almost an actor in a way, and,
Yeah.
and drawing on your own personality traits and character traits, and projecting those the way an actor would project into a character they're playing.
Now, as a writer, what is your process? Do you tend to do a lot of backstory, like do you create these large character backgrounds for all of your characters, or you just sort of just jump in?
Sometimes I do actually work on the character in that way, and writing a bio, a short bio. It really depends a lot on the type of book that I'm doing. I think that it's very necessary to know each character and know them in that deep way. And I was just talking about how writers are like actors. When I first started writing, trying to write full time, I did take some acting courses, not to act, but actually to help me with dialogue. And there was a wonderful book that I read that I still keep that has helped me so much as a writer, in the past mainly, but it's called Respect for Acting by Uta Hagen. And there are sections in that about creating character as a role, as an actor, where you do create the whole biography of the person. And I would suggest that actually to someone who is just starting out writing, because when you start a book, you want to place that person, that moment in their life, with everything coming together that has ever happened to them, that they're ever afraid might happen to them,
Yeah.
that they ever wish might happen to them.
Yeah.
So to get that authenticity of a character's dialogue and their reactions and their thoughts is very important, and that's what makes books engaging and draws a reader in.
Now, you spoke recently at Book Review in Huntington. I was lucky enough to attend. It was wonderful. If we can talk a little bit more about the writing process, you said a few things during your discussion that I thought were really interesting. You said sometimes writing is miserable, but we are compelled to do it, and I completely agree with that.
Well, I've always been compelled to write. Even before I could actually read, I used to make up poems and stories that my mother would, in a very sweet motherly way, would write down, and But I think that writers, you have an impulse to write, even if you're not getting paid for it.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
I think that's a telltale sign that you're one of one of the weird
club.
ones. One of the club. So so I think so. There's a compulsion to write, I think that sometimes writing is hard work. And that's because I think for me, if I'm not at a certain deep level and the writing comes automatically then, getting down there, I call it like going down into the tunnel. Like once I'm down in the tunnel, like it's fine. I'm like mining away.
Yeah.
And even when I have to get up from my desk or do some, stupid thing like cook dinner for my family,
Oh.
I'm still thinking. Sometimes I have my best ideas when I leave my desk, and I think
Yeah.
I'm doing some, automatic chore around the house, and I'm getting some more ideas, more dialogue is coming into my head. So I know, like on a certain level, my mind is in there and it's churning out the work. But I think that it's very painful sometimes to sit down and start a book, even if I've done an outline, et cetera. It's that becomes the uphill part of the
Yeah.
job.
I think it's true. I think writing is a difficult proposition, and I think there is a misconception that sort of writers just lounge around waiting to be inspired, when it really is. I mean, especially for serious or working writers, it's really not that way. You really have to, create some sort of regimen for yourself. You can't just wait to write when you're inspired, or else you may never do it. And there's deadlines to meet. And
It is a habit. Again, if you're someone who's thinking you want to write, it's the same as any other habit that you get yourself into. That even learning how to drive, for instance, when you first learn how to drive, it seems so complicated and it seems so hard and it seems like it's taking up so much of your mind. But then you get in the car and it's automatic and you're
Right.
thinking about 10 other things. So as a working writer, you're at that point where, I get into my in front of my keyboard and it's like I'm in the car. I turn the key and I go. But it's getting to that point. And also, I think that you really have to tamper down any voices in your head that will cause static and resistance for you. And,
yes.
and just ignore that. And every writer has that, I think. And I think that any kind of creative act, there is anxiety mingled with the creative
Yeah.
impulse.
Yeah, I agree.
And then it's just getting past, pushing away the anxiety and getting past that and just going for it.
Yeah, I always say that self-doubt is just part of the process, and it's just managing that doubt enough to produce something. And getting back to you were mentioning the car metaphor. I find that in my car I get my best ideas. I don't know.
Me
right?
too, yeah.
What is it about driving?
Yeah, it puts you in that state of that brainwave state
Yeah.
that you want.
Now, what happens for you? I mean, when I get ideas when I'm driving, my kids already know that, oh, here she goes. Mom pulls over to the side, and I email myself my ideas.
Oh,
Do you do something
you're very
similar?
high tech. I have a little pad, or I have a lot of little index cards. Index cards are just part of my life. I mean, I'm surprised they aren't like falling all over out of my pockets here. So I have maybe my grocery list, and then like on the other side, there's some really important
Right.
idea, and it's words that no one else could understand. But
Exactly
it's the whole
right.
key to my entire
The key.
my entire plot is there.
That's great. It's funny, when I throw out random pieces of paper in my home, I always have to check the backs, like you were saying, because there might be something really crucial there.
Very important. And if I can only understand my own handwriting, that's part of the battle too.
One of the last things I wanted to mention that you said during your talk at book review was, when you write, I do not think about the reader, which I think for the general viewership might sound a bit cruel, but I think that that's very true, and I feel the same way as a writer, that if you spend a lot of time thinking about the reader, you're not sort of writing what's in your heart.
Yes, it's also, again, to get back to that driving image, it's really like trying to drive looking over your shoulder.
Exactly right.
And one thing I often tell friends who are writers, and maybe they're feeling a little stuck, and I often tell myself, I have a little sticky on my computer, don't think, just write. Thinking and writing are not the same thing at all. And I am not thinking of anything when I'm writing. People say, well, what do you think of? I go, I'm not thinking of anything when I'm writing. I'm just writing. I am thinking of, I am there in the place where the characters are.
Right.
And if it's really going well, I'm just listening to them and describing what they are doing. So I'm almost like a court reporter there. So I'm not thinking of anything.
That's exactly right. And sometimes that's difficult. I mean, I'm a working writer and editor, So the editing is always sort of there at the ready. And I always say to aspiring writers that you write with your heart and you edit with your head.
Right.
Right? So it's sort of that idea. You have to sort of shut off your brain.
Well, I spent many years as an editor working for different publishers, which has a plus side and a minus side. You know, if you work in a butcher shop, you never eat bologna. But so I know both sides of the desk and the business, or whatever you want to call it. But in terms of the actual writing, you cannot be thinking about your editorial. You cannot be looking at every word and every sentence. You'd never get a page done. You really have to totally shut that off.
I agree. How about after the book is finished? Are you one of those writers who looks at her reviews or those kinds of things, or are you already moving on to the next work?
Well, I think for these books, especially because it was a series, I was interested in a reader reaction. Certainly, you know, Publishers Weekly, Kirkus interested in the reviews, which were very nice and continue to be positive. And interested also in the reader reaction, and that's been very positive and growing. I don't, you know, jump out the window if somebody, you know, doesn't give my book a good review. Or I wouldn't get too far anyway. In my office, it's like pretty close to me. I've often said when I'm in the middle of a book and it seems so horrible, the only reason I don't jump out the window is because the dog's yard is like right next to my office. It wouldn't be fun. So I think that you have to have your own inner sense of your writing and your voice and what you want to say and the kind of writer you are. There are so many different kinds of writing, so many different voices. Just be the best, you know, Dina that you can be. Just be the best Anne Canadeo you can be, you know. That's all I can do.
Now, what would you say the most challenging aspect of writing is for you?
The most challenging aspect, I think, is trying to get the characters to seem authentic and real and engaging. And I think a lot of that happens through dialogue. And
I agree.
I don't know if that's the most challenging aspect, but it is the most, it is a big interest of mine. And I find that describing a scene comes easily, but I like to go back and make sure that it sounds like people are speaking in authentic voices.
Right. I agree. And what would you say is the most enjoyable part of writing for you?
I think one really enjoyable moment is being done with a book and being able to get up and stretch my legs. And
Agreed.
say, oh, I'm done. You know, I'm done with this. And I think initially, when you may have a synopsis, you may have an outline. Sometimes I have very detailed outlines. But when things happen beyond that and happen sort of, they bubble up and happen creatively, and something happens by accident that just seems so perfect, and that deepens the book and the story, that's great fun. That's huge fun.
I agree. I mean, those are moments where the writer feels like you're just a vessel, basically.
Exactly.
And reporting events that are taking place in your mind. Let's talk a little bit about the publishing aspect. I mean, so you're starting out, and you've finally written your first mystery novel. What was your experience in getting a publishing contract?
Well, I'm a fairly well-published author. Was already before I did these books. The mystery I had mentioned that took place at the restaurant, that never got published. It was sent around by my agent, and there was a lot of interest in it. People liked my writing. There were two reasons why it was not published. One was because at that time there was just this huge amount of food-oriented mysteries, and people said, well, there's so much food, and you know, we can't do another food mystery. Could this be a series, whatever. I think also I wasn't really sure exactly where this was going to go in the market. I wasn't writing to the market, and not that I advise people to do that, because it puts false, you know, parameters on your imagination maybe. But
yeah,
this was not really, I had been reading a lot of Janet Ivanovich, and I'd been reading a lot of Sue Grafton. So it was neither Fish nor Grafton. So people didn't know like what to do with it. Although I think that it was a really nice book. Nice book. I think it was a really good book and had a lot of good moments in it. And I hadn't written the whole thing. I'd just written a proposal. So an editor at Simon & Schuster said, I really like this. We can't do it, blah, 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 for various reasons. The cozy area right now, knitting is really hot. And we could really use a series with knitting. And why don't you give it a try? Now, at a certain stage in your writing career, the last thing you want to hear is give this a try.
Right,
like,
right.
I did not want to give it a try. And I didn't really know that much about knitting. And my friends kept saying, oh, give it a try. So I said, all right, I'll give it a try. So I sent in, 2 or 3 pages of just an idea of the setting and characters who were friends and a group of women who were very contemporary women of different ages who were friends, but not a bunch of, older women with knitting needles who maybe is the cliche idea of a knitting group. I don't know. But anyway, and a lot of humor and a lot of girlfriend jokes. And my editor, Kathy Sagan, really liked it. So we went on from there, expanding. I expanded it and did some ideas for plots and did I guess it was just an outline or a sample or maybe the first chapter of the first book, While My Pretty One Knits. And we went on from there. And it's been a lot of fun. And I have learned a lot about knitting, and I do knit, and I do enjoy it, and I do even have a little knitting group. And I think that this series actually could be about any group of women who are brought together for any various reasons, a book club, just being neighbors, just being friends, or brought together for some outside reason. And I think readers really like it because so much of it is about the friendship between the women. And they have all different personalities and are in different places in their life. One's a psychologist, one is a real estate saleswoman, soccer mom, and one is a graphic artist who works at home. Maggie Messina owns the knitting shop where they all come together. One is a student and keeps things lively. So I think that that's a real draw for readers, that the friendships between them and how they help each other with problems, with relationship issues, and that sort of thing.
Now, this is the 6th book in the series? Or?
That is the 5th book.
The 5th book. And you also said at book review that by this point, by the 5th book, you know your characters much more thoroughly and deeply than you did writing the 1st and the 2nd. That just comes over time, I'm assuming, by working with them over a period of years.
Yeah, I think it's a lot like just knowing people better and feeling more comfortable with them and knowing what they might say or do in a given situation and knowing how they interact with each other and getting even more out of that in the stories.
So it sort of comes to you faster during the writing process, how
I think
the characters would speak?
Yes, it certainly does. And I enjoy, I often picture them all together in scenes, but I like to break them off, maybe to focus on one character and her dealing with some aspect of the mystery, or put them together in different combinations of their friendships and have them go off and have little adventures that have to do with the investigation. In this book, I think one of the scenes that was so much fun to write was when one character, Lucy, goes with Suzanne, who's the real estate salesperson, and they go off, and Lucy's sort of pretending to be in real estate sales, which is totally not her thing at all, but they go off to sort of question someone who's a suspect in the guise of looking over this farmer's property that they might be put up for sale. And it is just actually their interplay and they're just the way they exchange looks and things during this contact with this other suspect is just actually, it's really funny. I mean, I was laughing as I was writing it, so I hope other people
And that's always a
too.
good sign. We only have about a couple of minutes left. If we can just touch base and talk about marketing. Would you agree, because you've been writing for a few years, would you say that the responsibility of marketing is falling more and more upon the author, or do you feel it's always sort of been that way?
Well, I do think that's true. I think that publishers are really feeling the pressure of all of big bookstore chains closing, et cetera, and outlets for books being reduced, and the ebook side, which is so promising, hasn't really made up for that lag yet. So their resources are pretty much focused on authors who maybe, $1 million and above for advances. So they're pretty much focused on those authors. And I'm not saying you're totally abandoned, but I think that the average author has to be pretty resourceful and get out there and do their own share of publicizing their book. That may not be going to bookstores and doing book signings, which is really enjoyable as a writer, and to meet people who've read your work and come out of your house and put on clothes, normal clothes. But it might, a lot of it can be done online.
Social media has been.
It's not. I don't know how to do that. I know that people do. And no, and seriously, and my publicist at SNS is saying, we're going to give you a virtual blog tour or whatever. So, there are so many ways that you can get actually more than the 50 or 70 or whatever people are going to get in the bookstore.
Yeah.
You go on some website and blog on a website, or have a link from your website to someone else's, whatever. Like I said, I know this is done. I don't know how, but you're hitting so many more people. You're making so many more people aware of your work.
Well, I'll tell you what. You can always come back here.
Okay,
and please come back for the next book in the series. We'd love to have you, and that'll be part of your new marketing plan.
That's terrific.
Anne, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on The Writer's Dream. Thank you.